for Susan and Sunny. Okay, good. I worked with them on Knock It Out of the Park.
Well, within the speed limit.
Spanning
Yes.
tobacco
1 mile an hour.
Yes.
Okay, that
Tropicana Field.
went by me.
Yeah, I think so.
Which is banned?
Yeah. No, I didn't hit.
It's banned at all ball fields and Tropicana Field. And when Tropicana Field joined, they became like,
Totally. Have the seatbelt, right?
they joined like a critical number of other ballparks where it kind of forced a national position in their negotiations. So, I guess you had I'm just waiting on Janet.
Totally.
I see where.
Okay, here, this is good, right? This takes it.
Everyone knows that from having
Right up in front of them. And notice rain.
To the right is not familiar with the term.
No rain coat.
Okay, we'll get started.
I wasn't familiar with it either.
I know where the
There's Pat.
Stuff is like, not real.
Great.
Shoulder a little bit. Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right.
People were walking in, the bartender's like, oh, you're having
Okay.
And,
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. If everybody could please find their seat, I would like to call the July meeting of the PSTA Board to order. It's July 26, 2017. If our board members and everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Scott, would you lead us?
Well, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So just a reminder to everyone that following the board meeting, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to go out to the PSTA bus stop right here, just west of the parking lot, for a quick ceremony for PSTA's third Breathe Easy smoking area, which we're going to hear more about during the meeting. We do have this is our public comment section. I want to thank all of the members of the public for coming to our meeting this morning. We're going to have an opportunity to hear from everyone who wishes to speak. Right now is the opportunity for public comment on the consent agenda or any other topic that's not on the regular agenda today. So for those who would like to speak about any of the action items, we'll give you the opportunity to speak on that item as it comes up when the item is discussed. If you'd like to speak now, please fill out a green card and hand it to Rachel. Raise your hand, Rachel, up front. And you have a 3-minute maximum time. So we do have one public comment card so far from Miss Vivian Peters. Good morning.
Okay, I'd like to congratulate Brad on his road trips. I read the comments about several other board members made. Some of them were very innovative of why they've never been on a bus, or unless it was yellow. But take a weekend, take the grandkids, go to a sporting event, do something. Go and see what people use the bus, what they do, and where they go. I'm not going to say everybody has to, and I was very surprised that Brad actually committed that much time, because I'm well aware of dealing with the bus shelter, the bus schedules, and getting there and making connections and all that. But once again, congratulations on your road trip, and I'd love to see a report to the board on what you found. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Are there any other cards? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment section. We'll move on to item 3A for our presentations for our federal legislative update. Brett? Yes.
Thank you, Chair Rice. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to introduce our Federal Government Affairs team from Van Scoyoc, just like last month when we got an update from Ron Pierce and RSA about our state advocacy efforts. Harry Glenn and Steve Palmer, who are in Washington, D.C., speaking on our behalf and doing a great job doing that from their lofty heights, as you can see, are going to give us an update on all that, of course, nothing is ever going on in Washington, D.C. that we ever hear about, so they're going to let us know.
Well, thank you, Brad. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you again.
Good morning.
Morning.
Steve's going to answer all the tough questions. I'll take the easy ones. So anybody has about what's going on in Washington. I just want to say thank you. It's been a busy 6.5 months, 7 months so far on the Hill as far as transportation issues, and you and Brad and your board have been great, very active on engaging with your federal legislators. We wanted to give you just a quick update on some things that have happened. Steve's going to give you an update on the budget situation, and then we're going to talk about some of our projects we're working on, including the BRT and the low-no grants. First up, I think we've reported before, we just wanted to review for you some of the engagements you've had up on Capitol Hill and with your federal legislators. As you know, in March, the APTA conference was held in Washington. Commissioner Barkley came up with Brad and Cassandra and some of the PSTA staff. We had a really good round of meetings. Commissioner Barkley was in with Senators Nelson and Rubio. We saw a number of congressional staff, had some good meetings at APTA to talk about some of your initiatives. And it was impressive to be at the APTA conference and hear how interested they were in what you all are doing as being a national leader on using technology to try and connect your riders to bus lines. And so there's a lot of interest by APTA. Commissioners Long and Gerard came back in April, had another good round of meetings with Brad, including, again, went in to see Senator Nelson and Rubio to talk about some concerns. Between March and April, the President's skinny budget had come out, which was not really good news for federal transportation programs, and so it was a good opportunity for Commissioner Long and Commissioner Gerard to talk about funding issues and what the implications would be for your riders and your service. And we saw the local delegation, including Congressman Christ and Congressman Bilirakis. We also saw Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart from South Florida, who's the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee that funds all the transportation programs, had a very good meeting with him. I saw Congressman Ross to our east and Congressman Soto, a new member from the Orlando area who's very interested in transportation. And we had some really good meetings with congressional staff both times. One of the things we've been talking about, in addition to funding, is a legislative initiative to try and figure out how to begin getting credit for federal transportation credit for the rides you're using through Uber, Lyft, and the other connected services. Currently, under the FTA regulations, they're not giving you credit for those miles and those passengers that you're riding. So we'd like to try and figure out a way to do that. And there seems to be growing interest in that within the Congress. And then the good news is we also, between the March and April meetings in Washington, we also hosted a visit here. Chairman Rice hosted a meeting with Congressman Christ, came out and spent a couple hours at the facility meeting some of your employees and talking about the issues. It was his first visit out here, and I think it was very illuminating to him. And then the good news is from here, I think Commissioner Long and Justice are heading to Washington. They're going to be at the White House tomorrow on an all-day conference at the White House to talk with the administration leadership on a variety of issues. Not exactly sure, Commissioner Long, what the schedule is going to be and who you're going to see, but I'm sure there'll be opportunities for your commissioners to talk about transportation issues there. And it's a great opportunity. They're going to be at the White House, I think, for 7 hours, and so there's a long time to get in on those issues. So that's a great opportunity, again, to raise those issues. Finally, just last Friday, Brad was actually up in Washington based on one of our meetings back in April with the Senate Banking Committee. The Senate Banking Committee actually has jurisdiction over federal transportation issues. Brad was invited back from that meeting to talk on a panel about your use of technology to support your riders. And it was a good discussion up there, and the most important, there were two representatives from the Federal Transportation Administration there. National leadership from APTA and AASHTO were also there, so it was a good opportunity. It's one of those situations where you all have become a national leader on some of these initiatives. Brad is recognized as being able to provide advice to other transportation authorities, and he was one of only 3 transportation CEOs to be invited to this panel. So it's really, these Hill engagements, I think, help to establish credibility and make you all experts on the subject. I want to turn it over to Steve. He's going to talk to you about where we are with the funding situation.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and Harry, thank you. First, I want to talk about FTA funding a little bit because it's more relevant, but stepping back to the bigger picture, in any first year of a presidential term, there's always going to be a little bit of a slow start in terms of the budget process, and that was true this year. President Trump, if you remember, sent up a skinny budget, and then in May, after the last year's appropriations bill was finalized, he sent up a full budget. Now, his proposal was to cut domestic spending by $54 billion, essentially moving that into defense. And the budget process is now moving ahead, and the congressional Democrats or congressional leaders do want to put more money into defense, but they're trying to figure out, do they have to cut programs like transportation to get there? So that's some of the dynamics we're dealing with right now. I'll come back to that, where we think things are going to end up this year in a second. For the Federal Transit Administration, obviously first, the good news is both in the House and the Senate are fully funding the formula programs that were authorized in the FAST Act 2 years ago. So when it comes to the core funding for PSTA, that's going to for federal funding, that's going to continue and actually increase by a little over 2% over last year. So that is the good news. In terms of the BRT project, though, President Trump, one of the programs he proposed cutting was what's the so-called Capital Investment Grants program, which funds new starts, which are large rail projects, small starts like the BRT projects, and other core capacity projects. And what he proposed was essentially winding down the program, and no new projects would be funded, which would be obviously very bad news for us because they proposed essentially hard stop in terms of the small start projects. The good news is that the House, particularly, which went first, said, no, we're going to continue to fund small starts projects. We're going to continue, and they fully funded they finished out the projects for last year, so they're clearing out the pipeline so that new projects can be recommended for funding next year. And they essentially said, we're not going to take the approach that President Trump has proposed, and again, that's a positive step forward for us. The House did not fund the Tiger Grant program, though, which is the discretionary grant program for large infrastructure projects. You'll see at the very bottom slide here, this is the Senate. The Senate subcommittee marked up yesterday in real time, and the full committee markup is tomorrow. They did take, the leadership in the Senate loves the Tiger Grant program, so they have put $550 million in their bill. All of this has to be reconciled at the end of the year, so we're still in mid-process, midstream in all of this. But the Senate also, like I said, fully funded the FAST Act formula programs, but they've even gone further on the capital investment grant programs and fully funded all the existing rail projects, all the existing small start projects, and recommended funding for some of the new pending rail projects, the so-called new start projects. Again, what they've done is cleared out the pipeline so that and Harry will talk about this in a second, as PSTA submits its application to enter to get small starts funding in fiscal year 2019, the pipeline is pretty well cleared out in terms of overall funding levels. So the good news is the program's on track, and I think, and we'll talk about in a second, our optimism, well, I can do it right now, in fact, the optimism for the coming year, for the end of the year. Again, this just gives you a sense that the Senate, the allocations, the amount of money that the House and Senate have gotten, are above what the President had proposed, not quite what they, hope to fully fund the program. But the goal, our optimism is that because Congress wants to put more money into defense, they have to actually raise the overall caps. There are spending cap limitations in place. And unless they do that, budget sequestration comes back, and no one wants that. No one wants to see defense cut across the board, and that means there's optimism for domestic programs as well. We can't tell you today how much money that will be, but we're hopeful that that will be enough money to continue the Small Starts program, fully fund it, and allow the BRT project to enter the process next year.
So specifically, as Steve mentioned, there's implications for the budget on a couple of your programs. The first, obviously, your major federal initiative right now is the Central Avenue BRT project. When Commissioner Barkley was up in March, when Commissioners Long and Gerard were up in April, we talked to all the members and all the staff we saw about the importance of the BRT project. Had a great conversation with Congressman Chris when he was out here about it. So, your work and Brad and Cassandra and the staff continue to move forward with getting your application ready to submit to the Federal Transit Administration, I believe, in August. They continue to have had discussions with the Atlanta Regional Office. So the goal is to get that application in. Steve mentioned one of the goals is to make sure that this appropriations process continues to fund the existing projects that are in the pipeline, so that when your project comes up and is ready for funding in fiscal year 19, not 18, but 19, that all the previous projects are funded, the pipeline is clear, and you're able to get, it's about $20 million, I guess, Cassandra, for this project. So that continues to be our goal, to make sure these projects are funded. The other thing we'll continue to do is build support. Once the application is submitted, our goal is to get letters of support from your congressional delegation to make sure that the FTA understands that there's broad bipartisan support for what you're trying to do with this BRT project. The other grant initiative that's underway right now, as you know, the board has made it a priority to try and convert your fleet, and one of your priorities is to go to electric buses. So your staff submitted an application on June 23rd to the Federal Transit Administration for what they call the low-no program, which is the low and no emission vehicle program. This is a program that allows transit agencies to convert their diesel buses to CNG buses or electric buses. You all are moving towards the electric situation. The application was submitted to FTA in June. We've gotten good letters of support from Senator Nelson. I believe there's one coming, if it hasn't come yet, from Senator Rubio, and Congressman Kristen Bilirakis have weighed in too. And in fact, the conversation back and forth about the application generated a visit just last week from Senator Rubio's new district director. She wanted to learn more about what you're doing, so she came over and did a tour here to learn more about the low-no program. I think we expect those awards to be made sometime in September. The federal fiscal year ends September 30th, so they have to try and get these funds out the door before the end of September. So hopefully we'll hear good news in September. Other initiative coming up here, and Steve's going to talk a little bit about this, is, as you know, and I'm sure Commissioner Long and Justice will hear about this in Washington. There's the President has proposed a major infrastructure initiative, which has kind of been delayed, but still on the table. Steve's going to talk to you a little bit about that.
And I probably could let Harry finish that, because there's a lot that we know about this infrastructure initiative. The President campaigned on a $1 trillion investment package. Over time, we've begun to realize it's not $1 trillion in new federal spending. It's really $1 trillion in total spending, where essentially 20% of that $1 trillion would be federal spending, I think, and the rest would be, he envisions that it's private sector investment, public-private partnerships, tax credits. Even, you'll hear more about this, I think, in the fall, asset recycling, where essentially you sell an asset to a private sector entity and then they operate it. And I think the Trump administration envisions that if you sold PSTA for $100 million, that would be counted towards his $1 trillion. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what this infrastructure initiative really is going to mean. I think members in Congress, the reason we put in the slide about the congressional disconnect is members of Congress on both sides of the aisle would rather see traditional direct spending made. They want to see increased local commitment, which I think you have on all your projects, but it's just a question of they want to see more federal funding so that they have a role in that process. The obvious question is, will earmarks return? We envision that someday they could return. There's a lot of discussion about having them return, but in the very near term, it's probably unlikely until maybe the next Congress, which is a year and a half from now. It's difficult to do right now. They chose not to do it this year. It's difficult to do next year in an election year, and so it's possible that they could come back. And the designation of these small STAR projects and new STAR projects could be an avenue towards having that all done. But this infrastructure initiative is going to take a lot of, if it materializes, will take a lot of time, and you'll hear a lot about it from Washington, D.C. The last slide we have for you today is just kind of, again, in the looking ahead process. What else is going to be on the table this year? What's going to suck up the oxygen out of the room in Washington? It's going to be, for the next several weeks and months, health care reform. The Senate is voting right now. They're going to continue until they have a bill, I think, which could be this week or next. They're going to then go to the House, have to reconcile the difference with the House somehow, and they'll try to present it to the President probably before September 30th, because under the procedural rules, they've got a quicker process, a streamlined process to get it to the President if they can get it done this fiscal year. Again, I mentioned the infrastructure. We've talked about appropriations. The other thing to look forward is here from Washington is there's probably, as I talked about these spending caps and increasing defense spending, there's probably going to be an effort to craft a large budget agreement. because the debt limit needs to be increased in September as well. So you've got all these different issues. You've got the appropriations bills, the need to spend more money, the desire to spend more money on defense, the need to address a debt limit, and tax reform is going to be coming. So all of these issues are going to be floating around in the fall, and there's going to be a lot of activity in terms of trying to structure something that will allow increased spending for both domestic and defense programs. And that will be a good thing, I think, for PSTA as well. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, the one other footnote, we talked to Brad about this on Friday, is one of our projects we're going to work with Brad on in the next couple days to get ready for the legislative committee is last year, the last 2 years, we prepared for you a federal agenda, draft federal agenda for your review and approval. We also prepared a timeline for how to execute that agenda, just what's happening. This past year, as Steve mentioned earlier, was a little bit of an aberration because we had a new president. The previous budget hadn't been concluded, didn't conclude until May, almost 7 months late. The president's budget request, instead of coming up in February, didn't come up until May, so that delayed the start of the appropriations process this year. Hopefully next year things will get back on schedule, and so we'll provide a timeline that you all can review of when it's a good time for you to come back up to Washington, other things we need to be thinking about and doing, much like you do with your state agenda, to just come up with some guideposts for what we can do over the next 12 months. So we'll work with Brad and get that ready for your review at maybe I'm not sure what Brad's scheduled the next meeting, so we're happy to answer any questions about that or anything we've talked about today.
Okay. Board members who have questions or comments, just remember to please hit the red button on your mic. And we have Commissioner Johnson.
You knew I was going to ask this, didn't you? Where do we stand on transportation disadvantaged?
We have talked to the FTA. Well, I think part of the problem, as Steve mentioned earlier, is that this administration, as you know, the administration has been a little slow in bringing new political leadership on. The Department of Transportation is actually doing pretty well at getting their political appointees in place, but they still, I don't think, have really come up with what are their priorities and how are they going to execute some of their priorities. In fact, the Tiger Grant program that Congress funded last year, they still haven't put out a request for proposals on what to do about Tiger Grant. So that's kind of where you see an administration shape its policy and kind of what their priorities are. We have been in touch with FTA. I think we've been exchanging emails with their office that funds some of the wellness programs and other things, Ride to Wellness and some of the other programs. So I think it remains to be seen what Secretary Chow and her staff decide are the priorities. So we'll make sure that as they're working through that, we'll talk to them about the needs for transportation disadvantage.
My big concern is that while we talk about a wellness program, transportation disadvantage is a whole lot more than that. All the money that we have put in as social workers or whatever to rehabilitating people, we get them all rehabilitated, new jobs and new ways to do things, and then they sit at home because they can't go anywhere. There's no money to put them on the bus or, transport them in any other way. And they don't understand that. They don't understand that it is not just going to the doctor. It's a whole big, huge.
So two comments, 2 points I'll make on that. One of them is that in the House Appropriations Bill, they have fully funded it's a very obscure account. It's called technical assistance, but it does fund the workforce training programs as well as the ridership programs for disabled people. Easter Seals and other recipients of those programs are getting more money this year in FY16 than they ever have in the past. It was in the past $9 million, now it's $14 million, and we were able to secure the $5 million for that funding in the House FY18 bill. The other second point, though, is we have an administration that wants to do away with the Federal Transit Administration. I mean, this is the House Republicans in their budget, President Trump, his OMB director, they would just as soon all transit programs to be funded locally. So we have a very steep hill to climb in terms of trying to convince them of the need for public transit, but also of the importance of the disadvantaged ridership programs.
Okay, but as far as they're concerned, the programs such as Easter Seals are going to take care of all of this. And workforce, they just got put out of business. So, there's a whole lot more to it. They don't understand it. Somebody needs to tell them, hello, we're here.
The other thing Steve and I were talking about earlier is as you know, we talked about this before, that there's the federal highway program expired every 5 years. They reauthorize the highway and transit program, so that'll be coming up for renewal in 2020. So the committee will actually start holding hearings on that probably next year. So there's an opportunity maybe to start engaging with some of our Florida members on the committee and talking about that issue and try and find some way to inject that into the conversation about transit funding going forward.
What they're not understanding is the same bus that Brad was riding is used also by transportation disadvantaged. It's not just the short bus. Okay, it's the entire community. So.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Barkley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Harry, I'd like to thank you for your hospitality when we were up in D.C. You did a great job of taking us around to all the different places where we should be meeting with key players in the transportation areas. And Steve, looking forward to working with you as well. I also serve on the Florida League of Cities Transportation Committee. And one of the things that Florida League of Cities does is they identify players that we should be in contact with for helping our particular committee with its agenda. What I would like to ask is if you guys could put together maybe a short list of key elected officials throughout the state of Florida that some of us may know or have a relationship with, and we could help you to help us.
Sure.
And that way we can get more people involved in the process of developing a key network of people who can help move our agenda forward.
Okay. Do that.
Thank you. Brad?
I just wanted to express my appreciation for Harry and Steve. They've done a fantastic job. Commissioner Johnson, your points are well taken. And as Steve just mentioned, it is very important for us to be up there in D.C. talking to our delegation and telling the stories of why public transportation is important to our community. And they do a fantastic job of connecting us to the people up there that really matter. I also want to thank our PSTA Legislative Committee, which is chaired by Commissioner Long and meets every single month and hears from Steve and Harry through the phone from Washington, D.C., as well as the rest of their team, as well as our great folks from RSA, Ron Pierce and Natalie and Alan Susky in Tallahassee. And we do develop these legislative agendas, and then we bring them to you, and then that's what we work on very hard up in D.C. So as Harry just said, the committee has already started working on our legislative agenda for Tallahassee, and then we're about to start again and work with Harry and Steve on a federal agenda. So if you're interested in adding something or molding something or coming with us on a trip to DC to advocate for something, you'll have that opportunity. But thanks to everyone on the board who's helped out with this, and certainly the Van Scoy folks.
Yep. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Steve. And again, just what Brad said, have the opportunity to travel to DC with Harry and with Steve. It's really just a great opportunity to see how the many different pieces come together in terms of policy and funding, because transit agencies can't get this work done all by ourselves. We are incredibly dependent upon our state and federal partners. So for the newer board members, the opportunity to serve on the legislative committee is really a great opportunity to see where the parts come together. So thank you so much for your great service to PSTA.
Thank you.
Dan Squayak. Thank you. Okay, so our next item is item 3B, the Breathe Easy program. We have our Chief Operating Officer, James Bradford, coming up for that presentation. He's joined by Susan Jenkins and Sonny Davis from the Florida Department of Health. Good morning, everybody.
Hello. I also thank you, Harry and Steve, for that excellent update and report. From a content perspective, it's going to be hard to measure up for all that good information you just got from our legislative update, but we'll try. We have a great subject matter here to talk to you about that we're very proud of. Good morning, first and foremost, to all of you board members, and good morning to our staffers and our guests in the audience. I'm James Bradford, Chief Operating Officer. And I would like to introduce the two ladies behind me who are going to speak shortly. We have Susan Jenkins, who is the Tobacco Policy Coordinator from the Florida Department of Health in Pinellas County, and also we have Sunny Davis to her right, the Tobacco Program Manager, also from the Florida Department of Health in Pinellas County. So as I talk, you're going to see on the screen here, if that comes up in a moment, some pictures that are scrolling of what we're proud to introduce to you today, the Breathe Easy program, which we're going to, both of us are going to tell you more about. So I had the good fortune and privilege to meet these wonderful ladies about 1.5 years ago, and we came together. Commonalities brought us together in the form of, resolving smoking issues and challenges around our bus shelters, our bus stops, and particularly right across the street in Carillon. I know Susan was called on by Raymond James to kind of help them figure out how to kind of keep the smokers away from those who didn't wish to inhale it, who weren't smoking. So, and happened to be around our bus shelters. So we met a couple of times to talk about what kind of solutions we could come up with. Is it greater signage? How do you enforce that? With over 5,000 bus stops, 700 bus shelters, definitely a challenge. Around our third meeting, Susan, Sunny, and myself, we just hopped in a vehicle and we just drove around our system. We went around our different terminals, and at each stop we just got out and we walked around and we just observed. And we walked through, and one of the things we noticed is there are a lot of folks that smoke in no particular area. So you're literally going through and inhaling smoke that's wafting from every direction, whether you want to or not. Whether you're a young child, mothers and fathers pushing their babies in the baby carriage, there's just really no way to contain it. So I think it was upon that day that we really kind of came up with this concept of a Breathe Easy zone, and thus the Breathe Easy program was born. In a sense, an area that you could designate, you say, okay, do you make it, tobacco-free grounds? Do you make it smoke-free? Who's going to enforce that? So how about you try to designate an area where smokers go, and then all the other areas where you're not smoking is thought of as a Breathe Easy zone. So, and we love to be able to bring this to you because we love to be able to kind of be leaders in the area of innovation and kind of coming up with smart ideas. So that was born, and we piloted the last few months at Grand Central Terminal and at Park Street Terminal, these Breathe Easy zones, if you will, and you'll see some of them in the pictures that are scrolling, and they work like a charm. And before even kind of going up and educating folks of what they were, and one of the things I remarked at a presentation I did at the Mid-County Health Department in Largo was literally we painted one of these zones, and within the next morning you just see folks gathered in it on their own. And it's kind of like if you paint it, they will come, I guess. If you build it, they will come. So that's kind of what happened, and folks made their way over there. So we're very proud of that. But without further ado, because you know me, I can go blathering on all day long. I'm going to present to you Susan and Sunny.
Good morning. My name is Sunny Davis, and I'm the Tobacco Program Manager with the Department of Health in Pinellas County. And I want to thank you for having us today and for inviting us out for our ribbon cutting ceremony after this. Certainly to invite you to come out and take part in that celebration, as well as we have some giveaways and some things that we're talking with the community members about in terms of our program. So we are, Susan and I are both working for the Florida Department of Health in Pinellas County, and I know you all see a lot of logos floating around, and so I just kind of wanted to give a brief explanation of what we actually do. The Bureau of Tobacco-Free Florida, those are the people who put out all those nice commercials on TV that you see all the time, and we actually work under the umbrella of that bureau. They are grant-funded by tobacco settlement money, and that is how we have the opportunity to do what we do in all 67 counties in the state of Florida. The Tobacco-Free Coalition of Pinellas County is a local group of partners from government organizations, healthcare organizations, community members, people who decide they want to come out and work towards some kind of policy change. And we meet quarterly. And so, of course, all of you are welcome, and anybody in the community in Pinellas County is welcome to take part in that coalition. And we do look at some of the issues and problems with tobacco in our county. And of course, we have students working against tobacco, which is our prevention group in the middle and high school. And they do events and do a lot of promoting and advocating for the prevention of initiation of smoking in schools and among kids. So I would be denying my former teacher that I am by not giving you some education about secondhand smoke. Secondhand smoke and tobacco smoke in general has more than 7,000 chemicals that have been identified so far. 250 of those chemicals are actually known toxins, and 70 of them are known to directly cause cancer. So, you know, we at the Department of Health and we with the Bureau of Tobacco-Free Florida are not anti-smoker. We just respect the right of people who choose not to breathe in tobacco smoke. And so we, you know, we are looking for ways to promote those breathe easy type situations, especially in public places. 48% of adults in Florida have been reported to have been exposed to secondhand smoke. 36% said they were exposed in public places. Of course, that number is probably a lot higher than 25 years ago. The Florida Clean Indoor Air Act took care of a lot of that exposure because we no longer have smoking indoors in public places, but there is still some work to be done on our part. And so something that a lot of people don't know is that just walking through secondhand smoke can trigger a heart attack if somebody has a heart condition. It can also trigger respiratory diseases like emphysema, asthma, people who are suffering from different lung disorders or lung disease, and also sudden infant death syndrome. So when we saw some of these issues, of course, you know, we thought, well, what can we do to prevent some of that secondhand smoke exposure in our public places? And that's kind of when the issue of the bus terminals came up. And of course, secondhand smoke causes nearly 34,000 premature deaths from heart disease among non-smokers in the United States every year. So with that, we saw this as being an issue that we needed to really address, especially when we were, you know, heading through those bus terminals and seeing so many people who were smoking around those baby carriages, around people with disabilities, people who are elderly, people who are regular community members who just didn't really want to breathe in that secondhand smoke. And there were some complaints even while we were at those bus terminals. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Susan Jenkins, who's going to talk about some of the work that she's done in order to alleviate that.
Thank you. Just to go back a bit, I deal with the businesses in Pinellas County, housing in Pinellas, and I follow up on complaints generated from Tallahassee and local complaints. So I received a complaint. I came over and met with Brad. I had looked at the shelters at Carolyn, and it didn't have any signage. And Brad, I give you great credit, immediately had signage put up in those shelters. And then he said, what about meeting with James? And, you know, we'll continue this. So I started meeting with James, pulled Sonny in. We started talking about what we could do in Pinellas to make the shelters, the terminals safer for people. And I think we mentioned some stats, but I wanted to share with you that 82.4% of Floridians now do not smoke. That's a huge majority, and they don't want to be around secondhand smoke. So, and the other stat that I'd like to share is globally over 600,000 children and adults die each year from secondhand smoke. So it's a big issue that we need to address. Anyhow, so we started sitting down with James, talking about it. As he shared, we went around to the bus terminals, looked at it, talked to the people, and they really were over secondhand smoke. Many of them said, what can you do? Can you help us? I know James went to one terminal, I think it was Grand Central, and a guy came up to him and said, just help us with secondhand smoke, or can't you do something about this smoke? And so it was a big issue, and as Sonny said, it was around babies, disabled, seniors. I mean, it just was a big cloud of smoke there with nowhere to go. So we sat down and talked about what to do, and we came up with Breathe Easy zones. So I just give PSTA a lot of credit for walking your talk, for doing something to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of Pinellas County. Thank you.
I just wanted to make one more remark. I just wanted to thank Susan and Sonny. It's been an excellent partnership the last year and a half. And, these two have really dedicated themselves to working with us and helping us kind of create something that's great that we think can be a model, even for other transit agencies in Florida if they're not already doing something similar. And, this is something, and we've been hearing this, and certainly when Brad goes out to his town halls and from customers, hey, what can you do about it? So finally, we were able to come up with a solution, and it works. And that's the most important part. So, we're very pleased here today, and we're glad to be opening this third Breathe Easy Zone later this afternoon.
And just in closing, we'll continue to work with PSTA. We love the partnership and appreciate everything you're doing. We can't say enough about that. We're also going to assist with like health fairs, screening, signage, and we're going to continue to work to ensure that not just the terminals, but the shelters also have appropriate signage. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And last year, the City of St. Pete had the opportunity to work with both of you on our Knock It Out of the Park initiative to ban chewless tobacco from Tropicana Field and other athletic fields. So thank you for the important work you do for public health. I think we have a couple of people lined up here. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. The one thing that I notice is around so many of our bus shelters are tobacco butts just on the ground, and it seems to be sending a message about our system that is contrary to a clean, easy to use, convenient system. And have you ever worked on getting rid of butts or the way that properly to dispose of butts? Because it sends a message as well.
I know preemption is an issue that comes up in parks and beaches in the Florida because there are preemption laws. But one of the ways that we look at combating that is through the litter laws. And so that, if that is an issue, we can definitely look into better disposal of some of those cigarette butts that are hanging around some of the bus stations and terminals. But yeah, we can definitely look into addressing that. That's a concern.
You mentioned preemption laws. What were you referring to? Are we preempted from?
No, certainly not. It's preemption laws have to do with beaches, basically. So, yeah, they're public parks and beaches.
The other question is, on our public service announcements on the buses, do we talk about smoking? Is that one of our allowed messages?
Posters.
There's signs on all the buses and at the shelters and transit centers that say now whether the Breathe Easy Zone and where you're supposed to smoke. And there's no smoking on the buses, of course.
And those shelters, because they are enclosed, if they're enclosed on three sides, they may be covered by the Florida Clean Indoor Air Act because they are an enclosed shelter. So,
thank you, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Sonny. Thank you so much for your work. And we will be, our board will take a break at 10:30 to join you outside for our Breathe Easy event. So thank you. James Bradford, thank you for your work on this. Our next item is our committee updates. 4A, our Transit Riders Advisory Committee update from Gloria Lepic-Corrigan.
So I don't knock
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Rice, Mr. Miller, and esteemed board members. The PSTA track meeting was held on July 18th. Our first action item was a presentation by Henry Lukasik, Director of Maintenance, requesting approval to continue the contracts with Frasco International for the purchase of bus shelters and Certus Builders for installation of those shelters. Our committee asked a number of questions about the bus shelter program, the budget, and the goals for the program, and then we voted unanimously to support the contract and recommend them to the board for approval at this meeting today. Then Jacob Labutka, Transit Planner, presented an annual progress report of the 10-year Transportation Development Plan, the TDP. Mr. Labutka shared the past year's accomplishments and highlighted progress on the 10-year implementation program based on the community bus plan. This report has significant impact on PSTA's future budget as it enables PSTA's eligibility to request funding from FDOT, and it is an information item for you today as well. And then, as noted in prior meetings, the PSTA track committee had agreed by consensus to focus on 3 initiatives this year. And in June, you received our draft letter regarding safety. This month, we turned our focus to regionalism. Our working group of volunteers met on June 20th to craft our letter, and then the full track approved with some minor modifications, the letter that is in your packet today, the draft. With all the discussions about regionalism, we asked ourselves what regionalism means to us as transit riders. We compared our situation to those of car drivers, who can and often do take full advantage of the array of opportunities in the Tampa Bay region. When car drivers choose where to live, work, recreate, get medical services, county lines really don't play much of a role in most of their decisions. But for transit riders, they absolutely do. Our options can be limited by the lack of strong regional transit integration. We had stories of having to forego activities where transit options were unavailable or too cumbersome. In particular, we noted the absence of a contiguous paratransit system throughout the Tampa Bay region. Further, the current regional transit services do not adequately serve the tourism industry on which this region so heavily depends as well. As a group, we agreed that we want and need both a robust local transit presence, PSTA, and also delivery of better and integrated regional service. We plan to send this letter to TBARDA, to TBRPC, to FDOT, HART, the Forward Pinellas Planning Advisory and Technical Coordinating Committees, to FCAN, TMA, and the PASCO MPO and PCPT. Sorry. Today we are asking you to, again, please read the letter and hear our concerns, and then please provide us with your comments or questions. We welcome your input to that letter, and then recommend to us any additional recipients for the letter and any ideas for presentations of this initiative at future meetings with which you may be involved. Finally, our next track meeting will be held on Tuesday, the 15th of August at 4 p.m. here at PSTA, and as always, we welcome you to come to our meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gloria.
Good job.
Hold on just a minute. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The one comment on the letter, on page 2, it references many municipalities to manage transit. You might want to change that to many counties to manage transit, because within Tampa Bay, it's transit, it's countywide.
Correct.
Thank you, thank you. And this is one of the best tools that I have seen to articulate the benefits of regional transit approach. So thank you very much.
Okay, and definitely we should have our legislative committee take a look at this and provide some ideas for other agencies and elected officials and organizations this can go to. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Tornga.
Yes, I would like to thank the committee and the chairperson of this committee for the input that they give to us on the transit as part of the report. I think it's very specifically useful to us, the riders and the users of the system that we currently discuss and make decisions on up here. I think it's very important that the users have that input to us. And again, I just wanted to verbalize that, and I wanted to voice that, and I wanted to thank each and every member of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So our next committee update is Forward Pinellas from our PSTA rep on the MPO Forward Pinellas Board, Commissioner Bill Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Members of the board, I'm pleased to give a brief report on the Forward Pinellas meeting on July 12th. The key thing of interest to PSTA was an amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, to include Central Avenue BRT. Now, actually, it's been in there, but it was modified as we modified it at our last board meeting to indicate that it would be submitted by local funding, fully funded by local funding. This is a requirement from Federal Transit Administration for small starts funding that can be modified later if we succeed in receiving federal funds. It seems like kind of a catch-22, but we completed that requirement. The next major item of action was a report on the West Bay Complete Streets pilot project by the consultant Kimberly Horn. There are two alternatives for West Bay Drive connecting the Bel Air Causeway Bridge and the Pinellas Trail. The MPO board approved moving forward with a concept that would reduce lane widths, add a separated bicycle pedestrian path along the road, and expand the street edge landscaping and central medians. The board did talk about PSTA's concern with a 10-foot wide lane, since our buses are 10.5 feet. And that was discussed and will be addressed in the design phase of the project. Lastly, the board received an update on Tampa Bay Next program from Bill Jones, the FDOT 7 Director of Transportation. And of course, this is looking at interstate modernization and regional transportation that includes all modes. City of St. Petersburg City Council representatives, especially on Forward Pinellas, reiterated their desire for managed lane portions of the Tampa Bay Next project to be extended along I-275 into downtown St. Petersburg, and reiterated a request for lane continuity studies on I-275 to be included in the 5th year of FDOT's work program. This is consistent with the position that PSTA has taken in the past. And then also I would note that Tampa Bay Next meeting was held at the Epicenter on July 13th as part of a series of public engagement opportunities, and I understand that there will be future public engagement opportunities in both North and South Pinellas on Tampa Bay Next. The board will take a break in August, and so our next meeting will be September 13th. However, I would note that the new Forward Pinellas Legislative Committee will meet on August 4th. And one other thing of note, our former PSTA board member, Ken Welch, was quite interested in how our budget is looking forward, and so we did give an update to him on that. They were concerned with the potential impact of the expansion of the homestead exemption, and we were able to report that the projections had already taken that into account, so we're we're looking at a conservative forward plan. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I apologize for taking a little longer there.
No, that was a great report. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson, and thank you for your work representing PSTA at Forward Pinellas. So next on our agenda is the consent agenda. We took public comment earlier in the meeting. For any public comment on this item, board members may pull any items for discussion. If there's no comments, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. No comments. So would Rachel please open the voting system? It looks like we have all commissioners present have voted in favor, 13-0. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is our actionable approval of PSTA's employee benefit contracts, and this is primarily the contract for health insurance. The Finance Committee has had some pretty thorough discussions on PSTA's benefits, and I'll mention they unanimously recommend this item. And PSTA's Chief Financial Officer, Debbie Liaus, will introduce this item to the board. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Chair Rice. It's just 1 month ago that we were talking about the draft 2018 budget, and a majority of our conversation last month revolved around the challenges of health insurance, specifically to PSTA. And this is such an important topic because health insurance affects every one of our employees. Today I'm going to revisit why our claims costs are going up, what the renewal options were, what we plan to do about it, and the next steps going forward. The main reason our claims costs are going up is that the claims history, as you can see from this chart, remained fairly steady until just recently. And over the last 2 years, our claims cost per employee went up 91%. This happens periodically with every organization that you're going to have 1 or 2 really bad years. So last year we spent $8.17 million, so you can anticipate in a renewal process that you would see high numbers, in that we did. So to renew our program just as is, we had 3 proposers come in, Cigna, United Healthcare, and Florida Blue. Cigna came in at the lowest, which was a high percent of 32.6, but not compared to Florida Blue at 85.3%. So we had to come up with ways of handling this, and we had to take into consideration multiple factors. Currently, our union contracts have that our employees pay 50% of any increase, not only for our SEIU union members, but for all employees here at PSTA. That raised concerns as it related to the Affordable Care Act and the affordability requirements. In addition, we talked about last month that we want to remain competitive in the marketplace, meaning that a lot of people apply to government jobs because of the benefits, and we wanted to stay competitive to be able to do that. So we took into consideration all your comments and your recommendations last month. We had a very robust discussion at the Finance Committee, as well as we've had discussions with the SEIU union all along through the entire process, including as recently as yesterday. Everyone has been able to help us with a lot of ideas to put this together, and also ideas to research going forward. Out of this, we've come up with 3 options. This is historic for PSTA, to be able to offer 3 different options to their employees. I know this is hard to read, but the point is that we are, what do I want to say, individualizing what we can do for our members. So we've got 3 plans. One is renewing as is, which comes in at a higher dollar amount. An option 2, which is basically our competitive rates, as well as an option 3, a high deductible plan. What I want to do is spend some time talking about options 2 and 3. Options 2, the competitive rates. So we talked about last month, we wanted to come in where we could offer to our employees a rate of $29 for single members. If you take a look at the bottom left-hand chart, you will see the majority of our employees are in the single or employee-only plan, 429. So today they're paying $23.10. Under this plan, it would go up to $29. Looking at the bottom line, for the family membership, it's currently at $262, and it would go up to $272. In order to achieve these competitive rates, we had to make changes to our plans. We increased deductibles, we increased slightly the co-pays and your prescriptions. And one of the interesting things is we are increasing the emergency room visits from $100 today to $300 in the future. The reason being is when we did the analysis of why some of our claims costs are going up, a lot of our employees are using the emergency room as their first point of contact rather than going to an urgent care, to their doctor, or to a clinic like at Walgreens or CVS. We also kept the out-of-pocket costs the same. The other option, something new, is the high deductible plan. For this, we are offering it free for our single members and reduced rates for all the others. In addition, we had concerns that were raised about will employees save for a high deductible plan. So PSTA is willing to contribute anywhere from $200 to $400 into what's called a health savings account that the employees can also put into at any point in time or do it as a payroll deduction going forward. We feel that a lot of the employees will gravitate to either these two options, either options 2 or 3, rather than staying with things as is. The fiscal impact for this is about a $6.9 million impact to our budget, and that's including anything that we would put into the HSA accounts for our employees. We feel that more people who go to the high deductible plan, the more savings it'll be for PSTA and the employees going forward. I think, Commissioner Tonga, you and I had a great conversation last month, and we talked about in order to make this a success, the key objective is education, education, education. This was a lot for me to learn and understand, and it's going to be a lot for every employee to do so. So we're going to be spending the next month doing a lot of different information sessions, teaching them about the health savings account, how that differs from an FSA, what they can do to help themselves. If they've got $23 coming out of their paycheck today, they could put that $23 into the HSA account and help them for the future when perhaps they might have an event that's a significant event. 85% of our employees have never met the deductible. Another 5% have only gone between the $0 and $750. So I think a lot of employees will have to take a look at their individual situations, and we'll help them through that. We're going to introduce gap insurance such as AFLAC if people are interested to do that on a voluntary basis. And again, working with each employee to come up with what plan works best for their individual needs. And we currently have in place, and we'll be promoting it even more, is a healthcare advocate. So if you have an event where you have need an MRI, you can call them and they will shop for the lowest cost if you're in the high deductible plan. Now, the other thing is going to the root cause of why we're having high claims, and that's we need to work on our wellness initiatives. We did one over the last 6 months where we were incentivizing employees to lose weight, and in fact, we've seen our claims cost decrease over those last 6 months by 26%. In addition, cumulatively, for those who participated, we lost over 1,300 pounds. That's equivalent to 8 people, adults, in the United States. It's quite an achievement for everybody to have gone through. So we're going to be working on various wellness initiatives. We've had a lot of good comments from board members of also looking going forward at either incentives to do such things as going for your annual physical, or perhaps penalties for doing things if you don't do them. So those are things that we'll incorporate going forward. Now, medical, we've talked about that quite a bit, but we also have dental, vision, and life insurance. We're recommending that Cigna, we renew with them for the dental at no cost increase, Advanica for vision with a 7% decrease, and Minnesota Life for the voluntary life and AD&D insurances at no increase. So really today, we've talked about quite a bit. The action item before you is to actually approve the health insurance carriers that we're recommending, which is Cigna and Advantica and Minnesota Life. Are there any questions?
If there are any questions, yes, Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you. And I appreciate some of the changes and updates. We did have a pretty good conversation at the Finance Committee meeting. A couple of points. Did we find out what the contribution rates to the FSA currently?
I have not been able to figure that out. I know that a lot of people do use it for the child care, but I don't have those numbers, I'm sorry.
And do we know what, in setting up the HSA, do we know what the cost to administer the HSA accounts are going to be, or who that's going to be?
And that's actually, right now, the way the costs are, that's actually included in the Cigna cost. So if we go with another carrier for the HSA accounts, we're getting quotes from several other outside, I'll say, third-party administrators to that to compare what it would be. So I don't have those numbers, but it should be insignificant.
And I realize, and I apologize for this, because I was the one that brought up the HSA in a full-throated sort of way. But I wonder in the contribution if a health reimbursement account might not be a better way to go initially. Again, not expecting that we might not necessarily see as many contributions from employees to the health savings account. That's why I was trying to understand the flex savings, if people were really using that. That way, that money that's there comes back to PSTA if it's not used for healthcare versus staying in the employee's account, at least in this first year, to see how things work out. That might be an alternative. And I appreciate all the work that's been done on this. It was striking to me that this is an $8 million budget item. And I'm relatively new to the board, but we've spent a lot of time talking about buses and talking about air conditioning chillers and things that were a lot less expensive and a lot less impactful to people's lives on a daily basis than healthcare. And so I realize this bus has already left the station, right? So, you know, the open enrollments in September, things need to be moving in order to keep this going. And so I'm in favor of moving forward with Cigna. I think that makes sense. But I really would like to see us take up healthcare and healthcare-related items much sooner in the process, so that we can take some of these new ideas and have the time to really vet them out.
Thank you very much for those comments. And this is something here within the staff level we've talked about all year, because we can see what the claims costs are and where they're headed and where they were in the previous year. So when you're not seeing a positive impact, you have to start taking steps, as you say, early on. And I think all of you who've had a lot of experience in your own organizations or in your own life have been very helpful to all of us here to be able to come up with a program and, again, continue to refine it as we go forward each and every year to make it a better plan, not only for our employees, but hopefully see our health care costs go down. So thank you.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Debbie. That was a great presentation. I definitely support moving forward with this. I think you put together some really good options for our employees, and also I think a way that minimizes the cost impacts to PSTA. And I think depending on where those the employees choose to go on those three plans, this actually could end up saving PSTA money in the long run. So I'd like to see some updates on that as we go down the line, as far as, you know, which ones the employees are choosing. And I'm just curious, have we received any proposals yet for gap insurance? And if not, do we have a schedule for when that might occur?
We'll be taking a look at that literally in the next 2 weeks. We're already taking a look at that. Our open enrollment actually is in August, and our information sessions we're hoping to start as early as July 31st, because I think we have a hard and fast date at the end, towards the end of August for open enrollment, since we prepay the insurance in September for October.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, I do not have any cards from the public, but I just want to make sure, again, this is the opportunity for public comment on this item, if there's anyone in the room with us. Okay, I don't see anyone raising their hand or coming forward with a green comment card. I will ask for a motion to approve the insurance renewals as they have been presented.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Rachel, would you please open the voting system? And it looks like we're ready to vote. And is that all present? All present council, excuse me, all present PSTA commissioners have voted unanimously in favor. So thank you very much. Thank you for all the hard work on this, especially thank you for have brought a lot of ideas to the table. And this again reflects some positive policies that have come about because of a much better relationship and cooperation with SEIU. So my thanks to SEIU, my thanks to our staff, and to Brad Miller on this. Okay, so the next action item is to approve our FY 2018 millage rate for the trim notices. The Planning Committee unanimously recommends maintaining the PSTA levy rate at 0.75. Debbie, you're on again.
Thank you, Chair Rice. Yes, our current millage rate is 0.75, which is our cap, and staff in the Planning Committee, as Chair Rice just mentioned, unanimously supported this to move forward. It has the impact, even it's staying the same, of an increase due to the property taxes of our revenues going up by $3.3 million next year. And with the decision that we've made looking forward to the property tax exemption that we would anticipate would pass, this is helping us to balance our budget going forward over the next 5 years. So kudos to the board for that wise fiscal decision. Are there any questions?
Comments? Questions? Public comment? Oh, Commissioner Barkley?
I think it's very important that we maintain the current millage rate, especially with the possibility that we may lose additional revenue through the deletion of 25,000 of millage, 25,000 of property values for properties over 100,000 in the election coming up next year. So it's very important that we maintain our funding sources in the event that this has a negative impact on our future ability to operate, buy equipment and maintain equipment, and all the other costs associated with running PSTA.
Thank you. And just a note on process, we can come back with a lower, well, we're maxed out, so never mind, I take that back. We can always come back with a lower amount. We can't come back with a higher amount after this vote. And we are capped out at 0.75. So I'll ask for a motion to approve our proposed millage rate of 0.7500 to be transmitted to the property appraiser.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. And I did ask for public comment and do not have any cards, so we will move forward to our vote. And if, let's see, no, I'm the one. My vote's a yes. Did I get recorded as a yes? Okay, so the vote is 12-1 with a nay from Commissioner Scott. Our next action item card, which we were presented with last month, and the Planning Committee unanimously recommends for approval today. I think the Executive Committee has also taken a look at this, and I'll give the floor to our CEO, Brad Miller, to discuss the performance count scorecard.
Yes, thank you. And I am very excited to present the performance scorecard to you today. There's a paper copy at your places as well of what you're approving. just a reminder of where we have come and where we're going with this. It's really a three-part process for the PSTA board to consider. Part one was approving a new mission and vision statements, which you already did back in May, which are really the base foundation for what the goals and objectives for the PSTA organization should be. All the goals and objectives should be tied to our mission and vision for what we're supposed to be doing. So this performance scorecard has been developed by staff over the last several months, and what really the action item for the board to consider is really the key strategies down the left-hand column of the scorecard. Those 5 strategies tie directly to our Path Forward strategic plan, which tie then to our mission and vision statement. Staff has also been working behind the scenes on developing a background to this scorecard. This is the PSTA scorecard on our ultimate outcomes that drive to our strategic plan. But now there also exists departmental scorecards for each department at PSTA. The planning department, the marketing department, the operations department, all have their own scorecards that in some way tie to some of these, maybe not all of them, but all of these are met because those are the departments that really do all the work. And then thirdly, even below that, there are individual scorecards for all the administrative employees of PSTA, so that their goals and objectives are now tied directly to the organizational goals. So this is the action item for you today. Last month, Ryan Galvin, who's here with me to help me answer any questions, he with TransPro Consulting, who's helped us put this all together. It's pretty complicated behind the scenes, but I think once we have it in place, it'll be a great thing for PSTA. A little later on this fall, we will first have the Personnel Committee get together and then come back to you for the third step in this process, which will be to approve of a new performance evaluation process for me, the CEO, that you will complete, and then all of the employees, that for the first time ties directly to these performance scorecards. The one you have before you, the PSTA performance scorecard, will be on my evaluation as the CEO, or part of it, and then the departmental scorecards and then the individual goals will be for all the employees. And so we're hoping that we'll come back to you probably in the September board meeting to approve of this new performance evaluation process that all the employees will have part of their evaluation related to the goals, the scorecard goals. You will start seeing updates in your monthly board packets of how we're performing on these goals. You might see big posters in the lobby that we're showing to all of our employees how we're meeting these goals. It's all a way to drive performance toward meeting the goals and objectives that you, the PSTA board, set out for us. So I'm very, very excited about that. I'll be glad to answer any questions on this. Again, really, we're focused on the key strategies on the left-hand side. There was some comments from some of the board members I heard last month about some of the specific metrics, and those are illustrative metrics that are just used as targets to see if we're accomplishing the main strategies. But those can be changed from year to year, based on accomplishing the objectives. Like I know Commissioner Scott, he mentioned that maybe cost per revenue mile might be another factor. Believe me, we keep track of cost per mile. It's just not, we just use cost per hour on this, but we might change it if it turns out that that's a better metric. We'll just have to see. This is actually just the kickoff. The evaluation that you will conduct on, for me, the CEO, and then all the employees will have conducted the next one, will still be under the same format. And as of starting October 1, we will start collecting all of this data that you see on this page. So it really won't be for another year where you'll see this. But so we have a year to sort of get this implemented and get this underway. Awesome.
Thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions, comments for Brad? Do we have any public comment? Anyone who would like to submit a card, please do so now. Commissioner Gerard.
I just wanted to thank you for the metric parameters.
Oh, yes,
Sheet.
and
That
that's in
helps
your
a lot.
packet.
Yeah.
There's some nice detail on exactly how these different metrics are calculated.
That helps.
Yeah.
I would move approval.
Second.
Okay, great. We have a motion and a second to approve the performance counts 5 key strategies. Rachel, would you please open the voting system? Vote. And it looks like it passes unanimously, 12-0. Oh,
There should be
13, sorry, getting my numbers wrong. Okay, it passes unanimously with all present council members, commissioners voting. Thank you very much. And there wasn't a lot on over in enormous detail with a lot of questions with a number of different PSTA subcommittees that went into the process of the presentation that you heard today. Our last item is item 6D. Our last action item is to appoint a PSTA board member to the newly reorganized TBARTA board, which TBARTA now stands for Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Agency. The PSTA Legislative Committee discussed this and unanimously recommends PSTA's Vice Chair, Janet Long, to be PSTA's appointment to this board. Incidentally, it's new with the new reorganization of TBARTA that PSTA and HART each have representatives on this regional board. Brad, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Number one, I would like to recognize Ray Tremonti, the Executive Director of TBARTA, is here.
I didn't see him back there.
Looking forward to this. I think it's a great move forward to have representatives from both PSTA and HART on the board. I've had a number of conversations with many of you about the best way to have an appointment from PSTA, and I do think it's great to have Commissioner Long be at least the first representative from PSTA, because she's had so much involvement in advocating in Tallahassee and part of this idea to push a more regional approach to transportation. So those are just my 2 cents.
Okay, we have a few comments. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Did you turn me on?
I did.
You are on.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I was wondering if we know who HART has selected as their representative?
We do. They selected their Miss Kathleen Shanahan, who is a citizen appointee, I believe, of the city of Tampa, on their board.
Okay. I was kind of wondering if the board had, or the committee had thought about the appointment or the nomination of the chair of PSTA as an ongoing forward, and as an alternative, and I just didn't know whether that had been discussed at that committee.
The committee did discuss that, discuss different options for how the PSTA position might be placed. I mean, one issue that members raised was, well, maybe the chair of PSTA, whoever that maybe wouldn't want to do it, and it would be their option. The other issue is that the terms of the PSTA chair and this new TBARTA board are different, and this first, I know the committee had a long discussion about how this is a new organization for TBARTA. It's important to get it going quickly and in the right way, especially with the legislative session starting to have committee weeks in September, and then recommendations from this new TBARTA board back to the legislature next January. It's important to have folks that have already been involved with a lot of the regional discussions, which a lot of people on the PSA board I know have. And I think with that in mind, that's what led to the recommendation for Commissioner Long.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Gerard.
I just wanted to speak to Commissioner Long being appointed. I certainly approve of that. She has been our strongest voice about regionalism here, and hopefully this will be a very busy board talking about regionalism. So I don't know if you're ready for a motion, but
There's a few more if you want to go ahead and make the motion, we have about 3 people in the queue here. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I just have one question about this. That will make 2 county commissioners on this board, right?
we haven't.
Worth. Commissioner Long.
The county commission is scheduled to make their appointment on, at our meeting next week.
So again, I'm asking you, does that mean we would have
Yes.
2 county commissioners
Yes.
on this board? So that would leave all the cities out.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Long.
Well, I know that you know, Commissioner Johnson, that I am elected countywide and represent everyone in Pinellas County, including the municipalities. And I do come from a very strong municipal background, having served on a city council.
I understand that. That, I just, you know, the way that I read the selection process was to make sure that all parts of the community would be represented in this 12-person. So
let's move to Commissioner Barkley. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, Commissioner Long is an extremely busy woman, and she may have conflicts in schedules. I would like to find out, is there an alternate that would be involved in the event she is not able to attend?
Commissioner Barkley, I'm not sure at this point if under the new reorganization that they have figured out yet or allow us to designate I'm on T-Barter right now representing Mayor Kreisman, but under the new rules, cities can no longer send, the mayor would have to go himself, he can't send a representative. So I think I'd say that would be to be determined.
Okay, thank you.
And it's not necessarily our decision at this point what that process is.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to share, I think that Commissioner Long would be an excellent choice, given their past work in transit. I do wonder, though, from the PSTA perspective, if it would make sense to seek her being appointed from the county commission so as to then have a second person from the PSTA board at the table versus the other way around, having 2 people from the county. So I don't know where that process stands on the county side, but again, from this side of the desk, it seems having 2 PSTA representatives would be better than 1.
Commissioner Long?
Oh, I was just saying, well, I am on the PSTA board, and hopefully will continue on the PSTA board as long as I'm a county commissioner. So, like all of us sitting here, many of us wear very many hats, and I think we're very passionate about the work that we do, and that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. Commissioner Gerard?
Well, I understand what Mr. Shulman was trying to say. If you were appointed by the county commission, which I don't doubt would happen if you did it that way, then we could have somebody else from PSTA on that board,
Right.
like our chair.
Yes.
I would love to have our chair on that board, too, if she would be willing to do that.
I would be, because I'm on T-BARTA now anyway,
Right,
so
but you're gonna have
it's
to
a
drop off, is
familiar,
that what
it's a familiar board to me.
Does that mean that you're going to be dropping off, though, what you
Right,
said before? Okay.
right, so that, I think that was one of the things, is that my
Yeah.
chairmanship here would likely, I think, ends in
Timing-wise,
January.
yeah, the timing.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that, to go ahead and start with presumably who would be the next chair.
I do kind of.
I don't
like
think
that
we made any
idea.
assumptions on that,
Yeah, the
but
timing just.
Right. And we still would have we'd have one county commissioner now. But
I mean, Josh brings up
whatever.
a good
Yeah,
point.
I know, I.
A really good point. So I believe we have a motion and a second on the floor.
Did we?
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And
I'm not sure I actually.
my comment, oh,
I
I
didn't
don't
make
know
a
if she
motion.
made a motion, I think.
Okay.
She offered it.
No, I was waiting because gosh. Yeah, I think I.
while you're thinking, may
Yes,
I
let me
put in
think
a
about
comment
that.
here? My comment it's process-oriented. I think, I like the idea of the T-BARTA representative being the chair. And that's not an argument for myself, I'm talking about going forward, next year's chair. Having seen where, in the nomination process with committees and whatnot, this board is a heavy lifting board. So I wouldn't want to burden, we may at some point have the option of recruiting a really great chairman who wouldn't have the time or a schedule conflict with T-BARTA. So I would like to see our nominations and personnel committee at some point discuss a process where where the T-BARTA appointment would be the PSTA chair, but the PSTA chair would kind of have either right of first refusal. And either the chair could then appoint the person, or the nominations committee could appoint that person if the chair decided not to opt to do it. That doesn't really impact our decision right now here today. It's just process going forward. So back to you, Commissioner Gerard.
I agree. I think the nominations should stay with the board, though, rather than I think, on a general basis, that we're probably going to appoint the chair if they want to be appointed. But yeah, we can leave it open, but I think it needs to be not your appointment, but the board's appointment. Well, I guess I may get something thrown at me from the other side, but.
Just don't let it hit me first.
I'm going to sit back here. Yeah, I'd like to nominate our chair to the T-BARTA board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor to nominate the current PSTA chair to T-BARTA, which would be me.
Yes. Well, yes, I should have said. Council person, yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question, how long is the appointment for?
I don't know.
They haven't figured that out yet? It's 3 years. 3 years.
It's 3 years?
3.
So I guess just another question is just, whoever that is, right now the motion is for our chair, is that an acceptable term for you, for your schedule and just looking out, is that good?
I guess the question is I would be accepting this as the chair of PSTA, and that we would need to revisit this when the chairmanship of PSTA changes?
Right.
Brad?
That's confusing.
Okay.
So again, my understanding is that the new T-BARTA board, as newly constituted by the legislature, will meet in August, and they immediately have the task of coming up and presenting a report to the state legislature when the state legislature convenes in January. The nominating committee for PSTA will meet probably in early November to recommend a new chair, or potentially a new chair, vice chair and secretary treasurer to PSTA starting on January 1st, 2018. Chair Rice has been the chair for this will be completing her second year as chair, and there's no rule that says she can't be renominated. I know that was a discussion at the legislative committee about the terms. That's what I meant by when I said the terms of the PSTA chair position wouldn't coincide necessarily with the TBARTA schedule. There might be a change in chairmanship of PSTA right when, just a few months after the board meets.
Commissioner Wheeler, sorry, Commissioner Wheeler-Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that we have two highly qualified individuals, Commissioner Long and Commissioner Rice, that could be that representative. When we were in the legislative committee and we spoke about it, like Brad stated earlier, I know that we were talking about it should be the chair, would the chair have time, and the way that things go, and we really don't know how to vote. We'll go in January when there's a new chair. But when Commissioner Shulman brought up and Commissioner Gerard that if Commissioner Long could be the representative from county commission, you know, it would just make, I think, a better impact. We could have her from county commission, and then we could have our chair. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure I understood the math right on the term. So if you were approved today as our chair to be the representative for TBARTA, that could potentially just be a 5-month appointment, and then in January we would have to possibly do it again?
Potentially, yeah.
I'm not sure I'm crazy about that. But I would like to echo Commissioner Bowman's statement. I mean, both you and Commissioner Long are highly qualified and would do a wonderful job. I'm just, in my mind, just trying to think what's the most consistent way of getting it done. So,
Commissioner Shulman?
Yeah, I would like to say that I really do believe that Commissioner Long would be a fantastic candidate for the TBARTA board. And if we do move forward with the motion as it is, if appropriate, I'd like to see if we can make a recommendation to the county commission from PSTA that they put her forward, so she goes to that meeting with our support as well. Okay. I don't know if that's appropriate or that opportunity exists.
We could do that, but right now we have a motion, a second on the floor to address first. Alan?
I just wanted to point out that the term is a 2-year term.
Is it?
All the terms are a 2-year term. I've got the bill right in front of me.
Okay. Thank you.
There are term limits in there of 3 consecutive terms of 2-year length.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Commissioner Beavis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just procedurally, how does that work at the county commission? I know typically, if I understand it correct, the chair of the county commission somewhat delegates the appropriate board positions. Being the chair, does she, I mean, do we know that she's going to be the PSTA or the representative on TBARTA?
Well,
I mean,
she is the chair.
She's the chair? Does that? No, I get that. But so do you appoint yourself? I don't know how procedurally how it works. So, so she would appoint herself.
I'll have Commissioner Long address that because she is the chair of the Board of County Commissioners.
Yes, and I have already made my appointment to the TBARTA board, and I was chair before this new piece of legislation passed. And there are a lot of dynamics on the county commission, and there's a reason why we all get along and are as effective as we are. So I am pretty comfortable sitting here today sharing with you that I will not be the new board member from the Pinellas County Commission.
Commissioner Gerard?
feel like I'm watching a tennis match.
Well,
Let me,
it
if I,
seems to me that this is a new nomination, though. This is a new board, and it's a new nomination. I mean, I understand what you're saying about dynamics, but.
Well, if you understand it.
Well, we're nominating a
What
new
I'm
person
saying.
from here.
Pardon?
Yeah, well, I will be glad to argue that point when we get to a county commission meeting, but, okay, because I think this is a new board we're appointing to. But I hear you.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. A question following up on our attorney's comment, that this would be a 2-year appointment versus an appointment until we change chairs. It's, the motion kind of was saying this would be our chair, and the chair is possible to stay the same again in the beginning of the year. But, I mean, we did that last year, but that was kind of because our vice chair had not
Term limited.
had term limited and was able to normally move up. So I'm kind of confused as to what's the possibility. I agree that we have 2 wonderful candidates here, and I'm just trying to clarify if this would be a 2-year appointment, even if it was a 2-year appointment and Commissioner Long was not the county appointment to the PSTA board next year. I mean, they'd be stupid not to, excuse me. It would be,
Well, we're not, so.
it would be perhaps inappropriate not to continue her membership on PSTA, but there are different things in play here, and so.
And we considered all of them at the legislative committee meeting.
I wasn't there and didn't have a chance to
wasn't
observe,
either.
so. So the basic question is the appointment we make today for the 2 years, assuming that whoever that person is would be on the PSTA board for the full 2 years, or is that our decision today subject to review when we reshuffle the leadership of our board? Does somebody have an opinion on that?
Actually, let's go back to the motioner, Commissioner
Yeah,
Gerard.
I meant to clarify, my motion was to nominate Councilmember Rice.
Not the
I know I
position.
said the chair,
Not the
because
position.
I was having that,
One of those moments.
I was having one of those moments when I know her name perfectly well, but I couldn't remember it. But I was nominating,
For a 2-year term.
yes. But at this point, understanding what Mr. Long just said, I'd like to withdraw my motion.
Is the seconder okay with that? And I lost track of who the seconder was. Rachel, did you?
No, it wasn't. He
No.
seconded the motion before the motion
Yeah,
was made. It was board membership.
I'll accept the withdrawal.
Okay.
I would like to motion Commissioner Long as our representative.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, that's for the 2-year term.
2-year term.
And I guess with clarification that if she can't make it, we can find out. I know this is a new board. but-
No, the special act doesn't provide for
It does not.
Well-
alternatives, so.
That question was answered.
Okay.
Hold on. I have Commissioner Johnson next.
I don't think that there's anyone that sits on this dais that is not qualified to be on T-BARTA, and I think that that's one of the reasons that it was drawn the way it was. I just still have a problem with, if it's going to be county commissioner, then the county commissioner position should go to anyone other than a county commissioner. I don't think that you get 2 bites at that apple. And that's my only thing, so thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Gerard.
I just wanted to, I was responding to the bit of confusion over there. I mean, if whoever we appoint can't do it, they need to come back and tell us that so we can appoint somebody else. So that's their prerogative.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the floor to nominate Commissioner Janet Long to the T-BART, as our T-BARTA representative for a 2-year term. Would Rachel please, public comment. I've gotten good at lip reading, public comment. Anyone who would like to please comment on this, you can fill out a green card, raise your hand. Seeing none, would Rachel please prepare the voting system?
I don't have anything.
I don't have mine out.
I'm a yes.
Okay, so we have all of our present PSTA commissioners have voted. This passes 11-2 with Commissioner Shulman and Commissioner Johnson as nay votes. Thank you. Just when do we break for the Breathe Easy Zone? In about 15 minutes?
This says 11:30.
We went along just fine. We're okay.
So
11:30.
11:30? Okay. So we're not breaking quite yet for our Breathe Easy Zone. Congratulations to Commissioner Long. I know she's going to represent us in an excellent way on T-BARTA as we go through these transitions and changes with regional transportation governance. Yes, Commissioner Long.
Yes, and I just would like to share that, thank you, everybody who voted for me, and for those who did not, I promise to work very hard to represent your interest as well. But I do want you to know, as well as the staff, that I'm going to be leaving shortly around 11 o'clock because I have a plane to catch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And our next item is our informational item, the annual progress report on our TDP, the Transit Development Plan. And we have Cassandra Borcher, and we have PSTA's transit planner, Jacob Labutka, to give us the update. So Jacob, take it away. Or Cassandra, sorry.
Set this up, that this is an information item. As an action item will come to you next month. You will be receiving the full report in a couple weeks. And please remember that this is important for our eligibility for FDOT funding and the opportunities that we have to get grant funds as part of our budget. I'll turn that over to Jacob.
Thank you. So this document serves several functions for us. This is an annual report that we do have to submit to FDOT. This serves as our 10-year service visions that outlines our priorities that we'll carry forward for both operating and capital side of things. It also says how the implementation plan for getting those priorities accomplished and as it relates to our path forward strategic plan. This plan also provides a foundational element for other plans in the region, such as the LRTP with the MPO, as well as T-BARTA's master plan. And this, of course, identifies our priority projects, which are developed through discussions at our board meetings, and it outlines our legislative priorities, priorities with the MPO, as well as our TMA leadership group regional priorities. Our major update of this document is due every 5 years. The last one was done in 2015. This year is just a progress report, but this gives us the opportunity to provide updates on our ongoing priorities as well as identify any new projects that come along. We're also able to add that new 10th year to the projected financial plan. Wanted to briefly bring up the community bus plan because this is ultimately the source for most of the recommendations that come out of the TDP and the projects that are outlined here. And our goals as they relate to this are, of course, further outlined in our path forward. So I just want to give you a little preview of things that will be mentioned in the TDP, starting with a few general accomplishments. We were able to go full steam ahead with our system redesign efforts, including our October service change and our incremental expansion done in February. That piece is important to point out because that demonstrates the power of ensuring that projects are included in the TDP. We were able to secure about $1 million, about half the funding for that expansion, through a service development grant with FDOT for the next 2 years. So that really demonstrates the power of making sure that our priority projects are included within this plan. We were also able to go full steam ahead with our great innovative programs, including expanding Direct Connect, extending the TD Late Shift program, and initiating planning efforts for Mobility on Demand, better known to you as Sandbox or Paratransit on Demand. And we were also able to identify funding partnerships for Phase 2 of our shelter deployment plan. We also accomplished many things on several of our priority projects. I'm just going to highlight a few of them here. We, of course, went full steam ahead with our Central Avenue BRT. By the time the TDP is submitted in September, we will have submitted our Small Starts grant to the FTA, which should be done in late August. There's also a lot going on in Clearwater Beach. We are in construction procurement for the Clearwater Beach Transit Center, which should open before spring break of next year. We are also included in the state budget for PD&E for the busway, and in addition, we were able to secure $1 million for the design of said busway along the Memorial Causeway. And we also are continuing our involvement with Tampa Bay Express bus planning. We are part of a bus on shoulder study that is currently being conducted by FDOT. There's also some discussion at the Planning Committee about some of our ongoing projects, so I wanted to just give a shout out to a few of those. We're going to be continuing our plan to incrementally expand our services, as well as identify opportunities to fund regional express routes and take that Central Avenue BRT project even further by identifying opportunities to incorporate capital improvements to some of our corridors to implement more BRT and rapid services. And of course, related to all of those is revenue vehicle expansion, which of course would be done in conjunction with sustainably replacing our existing fleet. But in addition to our ongoing priorities, there are a few additional priority projects that we wanted to make sure got added to this year's iteration of the TDP update. First off is the integrated transit smartphone app development, which has been discussed some. But what that would look like is the graphic on the top right. On the left is a screenshot of the transit app, a trip planning tool for transit. And of course, on the right is our much-buzzed Flamingo app. So essentially, that project would just integrate the two applications. So the fare payment system would be integrated into the transit app platform for a one-stop shop for all of your transit needs. Second, we're going to outline our desire to get an autonomous vehicle pilot program started here in Pinellas County. The picture on the bottom right is what I find a very adorable example of an autonomous vehicle, which is a very standard look for a high-capacity autonomous vehicle, which is where we would think about leaning towards. We're also looking to secure construction funding for the Clearwater Beach Causeway busway, and we also want to enable bus on shoulders on I-275 following the completion of the study by FDOT. So these lists are included in your packet of our 10-year operating and capital planning priorities. This is essentially the same as last year. I've spoke to most of these today, but just because I didn't speak to some of these doesn't mean they aren't included, such as park and ride expansion. But we were also able to add our additional priority projects that I just mentioned to these lists. And going forward, last week, this was information items for both track and planning. Of course, this is being presented to you today. Staff is almost done with the draft progress report, so it should be delivered to all of you by August 11th, and you'll have plenty of time to review that before next month's board meeting, when it will come before you as an action item, and then we should be able to submit that to the state by the beginning of September. And now Cassandra and I will take any questions that we'll have.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I especially appreciate your including on your park and ride. I have found that in my limited riding on PSTA that the ability to go to a central terminal and park there and take the bus is a great solution for somebody that lives a little farther from the bus. So thank you for including that. And I also appreciate that being tied to the community bus plan, the fact that we have some routes that could be better if the frequency was more, that we would attract much greater ridership on them. And that's what the community bus plan's ultimate plan that we received from them included. Because once we do that, then that will enhance the TOD, transit-oriented development along those routes, and then we will eventually get better and better along the way. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Long.
Yes, very good presentation. Thank you very much. My question is, how many passengers can you put on the autonomous vehicles?
I believe that model is about 12 people, is that right?
And how soon will it be before we have them on the highway?
That's a great question, a lot of my purview. I think to start, we'd probably find a dense environment, like a downtown environment, to implement that first. So that would probably be the first phase of that. As far as highways, that's probably a little longer off.
Well, if I might, Madam Chair, how far along, Brad, is the autonomous vehicle pilot project in Hillsborough County going on right now?
With Thea? Brad?
Well, there's two projects. Thea on the Leroy-Solomon Expressway is got a grant to try to implement a connected highway approach, which is some technologies related to automated or connected vehicles. And then HART received a grant from the Florida DOT a year ago to try to implement a limited pilot autonomous vehicle along the Marion Street busway, just in a small segment in downtown. And I know that they're hopeful to try to get that up and running by the end of this year. I think they might be looking at early next year to have autonomous vehicle going back and forth in a straight line. What Jacob's talking about and what we're talking about is a little bit beyond where the vehicle would be autonomous operating with other cars. That might take a little longer.
So a follow-up, Madam Chair. So I'm only one member on this board, but I would like to suggest that we put the pedal to the metal and find a pilot project that would be amenable to this type of a vehicle and get it off the ground. I mean, this is the wave of the future. And it seems to me that with our density that we have in different parts of our county and the congestion that we have, there's got to be a pilot project that we can identify to really put this on the street. So I'd just like to suggest that because we have been on the front burner of some pretty innovative stuff, and I find this to be intriguing, and I'd like us to be on the front burner of this as well.
In just a short week, we'll have our legislative committee, and we will be discussing with our fine partners from Tallahassee about putting this on the agenda.
Excellent.
Exactly.
And Harry and Steve just heard it as well.
Exactly.
So, great. Were you going to speak next? Any other comments? Thank you for a really great report. Thank you, Jacob. Your enthusiasm is contagious. And I mean that as a compliment. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great to see your excitement working for PSTA. Okay, next, item 8 is reports and correspondence. Brad, could you update us, please, on some of the reports that have been included in the board packet?
Thank you. I'll quickly go through these as we hurtle toward our Breathe Easy event. In your packet are our operating statistics, and I just would note at the bottom of the sheet that shows all of our different operating stats, we sort of provide an explanation of what we think are the reasons for the trends in ridership that we're projecting. And I just thought it was interesting that half of the 6% drop in ridership that we had in the month of June despite my riding every day, was actually due to the fact that there were 9 fewer school days in June of 2017 because of the school change, the calendar change compared to 2016. And we do get higher ridership when school is in session. So I think that was interesting. Also in your packet is a list of the PSTA contracts. We provide that to you quarterly, and it's where Commissioner Schulman appropriately noted that the Cigna contract is our largest annual contract for health insurance, actually larger than fuel or DART on an annual basis. The DART contract in its 5-year total is our largest. One contract that is not highlighted, but is a contract we recently signed that I wanted just to highlight. We have a trial program with Tradewinds down in St. Pete Beach to allow all of their employees and guests to ride the trolley on Gulf Boulevard for free by showing their Tradewinds ID badge or their hotel room card. Key card. And that started on July 10th, and we're doing this through the end of the summer as a trial, and then with a arrangement if it's successful, and so far in the first few days of it, we know it's been very successful with the employees. They will be one of our first UPass contracts, but as a company, so it'll be a C-Pass, a corporate pass per participant there at Tradewinds. And we're getting lots of feedback from we've always get feedback from guests coming to different resort hotels along the beach about how they can take transit. And so we hope that this will be the start of similar programs at many of the beach hotels. We do have the next item on the agenda also I'll tackle is future meeting subjects, which is the legislative committee is our next meeting on August 2nd. Like I said, we're going to start preparing our agendas to bring back to you. And then next month's board meeting, in addition to the legislative agendas, you'll see we'll have some discussion and approval of our capital improvement program, which I know is a fun time for all of us to talk about the type of buses we might buy. Last, I would like to just highlight that PSTA, as you know, we live stream these meetings right now, and all of our community meetings are live streamed, and I know that we are the only transit system still in the state of Florida that does that. I think we're still one of the only ones in the United States that live streams its meetings. So it's out there, and we have a few dozen people that are watching right now. I know lots of the employees I've heard watch, and to my surprise, are very interested in what we talk about here. But we also are watching what other people do, and we learned from our president that he's very good at this. And so today is the first time Alyssa there in the audience has been live tweeting actions that the board has been taking, and I'm getting highlights of that. And so I would like to have her tweet one more thing out as a shout out to Henry Lukasik and our maintenance department. If you looked on the performance stats, you will notice that we had a unbelievably successful June in miles between road calls of 40-some thousand miles.
Wow.
Wait, Alyssa, I know I need to tell you the exact number here. We had a 432% increase, which is 49,042 miles per road call. Now, Henry did tell me, of course, that was an aberration and not to expect that every single month, but it's pretty awesome. And especially since I was riding and my bus never broke down. So that was a great job to our maintenance department, which that number keeps going up and up because we're doing pretty well. So hopefully you'll see that out on the Twitterverse as well.
What's our Twitter handle?
At Ride PSTA.
Oh, at Ride, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any board member comments, any other business? Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you. Just briefly, a couple comments. I had the opportunity of going over to Dublin, Ireland, for a week, and I was amazed to see lots of double-decker buses, city transit buses there, as well as also a light rail on their city streets. It also had a second route of light rail that was under construction. The next item I comment on is the regional transit feasibility plan, bless you. I think we need to help people understand how this would help them in their normal life, the impact on the cost of milk at Publix, or the cost of delivery of a new mattress to their home, or the time that that can be delivered, because congestion does affect those. I would mention that I'm a little bit frustrated at the difficulty in scheduling a joint executive committee meeting with HART. We're now looking out in September, and for us to be working together with them as partnership, I would hope that we'd be able to get that scheduled. And a comment on the recent article about riding the buses, and I would point out that I have an appointment at 1:20 at City Hall after this meeting, and in order to make that, I would have had to have left, well, I would have to be leaving at 11:20 to make that appointment. So sometimes our scheduled bus routes, it's really difficult if people have commitments and have other conflicts earlier in the day. So, when you don't have that situation, we have good bus service for somebody if they don't have to make a transfer. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, we've all received an email, we maybe haven't a chance to all look at it yet, from a rider, Carlin Robinson, who has sent pictures of a bus, 2623, that she rode on July 12th and is in again today, with pictures of a bus that's absolutely filthy, that is full of roaches. And I think we need to do a much better job of servicing our riders than that. Brad and James, I would request that you pull this bus 2623 out of service immediately until we can get this cleaned up and get it treated for pests. I tried to forward it to you, Brad, but it was too large because it had too many pictures in it. But it looks like it was emailed to the entire board.
I haven't seen it yet. I know I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if others have.
I haven't.
Do we have a
Yeah, I just got it this
contract?
morning.
Do we have a contract with a service that cleans the buses?
We do. We have a whole pest control program. We do the tenting and fogging and, yeah. This is, the email I got is from a Miss Carla Robinson.
Yes.
Yeah. She has been here, and she has given a proposal to be PSTA to contract with her to clean the vehicles.
Okay.
Oh. She's a known person.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if those are recent pictures, they're pretty bad.
Yeah, nevertheless, we should do our due diligence and look into the complaint, but keep in mind, this is someone who had submitted a bid for the services, so we'll proceed with, that knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from the board? Thank you, everyone, and I just want to say thank you for the earlier discussion and your consideration of my being your T-BARTA representative. I love PSTA. I am happy to do any work representing us in a regional capacity. I am also very proud of our vote to send Commissioner Long to represent us, and I think she's going to do a fantastic job. And, but I like the way Josh was thinking, going in that direction of increasing the presence of PSTA where we can. And thank you for putting that out there, and thank you, everyone, for giving his suggestion a thorough vetting. So I think we had some good discussions. We got a lot done today. Thank you. Before we adjourn, just a reminder, if there are those of you who can please stay for our Breathe Easy Zone event. It will be at 11:30, right outside by the layway. And we'll also be joining our former PSTA board representative, who's now a State House Representative, Wingay Newton. And without further ado, our next meeting is August 23rd, 2017, here in this room at 9 a.m. We adjourn our meeting. Thank you.
We'll probably be here like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Probably got spam filter.
Brad.
I haven't gotten it. I'm good, how are you? Okay. So
Want me to go back? Okay.
All right, take care. See you later. You want to be air conditioned on your way out to the bus stop?
Carry him off.
There's a bus stop.
Okay.
So I know that, and that's why I was asking about the flex spending account. Because if
I don't
my
know.
sense, based on what the way people are talking about it, is that highly compensated people are saving in the flex spending accounts to reduce taxes and put money aside for healthcare. But not the lower income side. So my sense is also they're not going to put money into HSA. So from an organizational standpoint, it makes sense for us is to we'll give you some money for the transition, you don't have to work, but if you don't use it, right, 5% of our people don't, then we keep that money. HSA is actually there. So I thought there might be a middle ground between getting some of our money back and helping.
The differences between a health spending account and a flexible spending account? Is it just what you're permitted to spend money on, or is that all subject to the negotiations with the vendor?
I think that a flexible spending account.
We're going to go people say we're going to have to opt out and say, they can always stop in mid-year if they notice it, but
I don't know that for sure.
And maybe there's a difference between, I think you gotta spend it. Like, if there's anything left over, it goes back. But it's pre-tax.
At PSTA, we used to have, anyway, we used to have that 15 years ago. And we would, one of them, we would lose at the end of the year if we didn't spend it.
Yeah. So I have a healthcare spending card.
So you can use that when you go to the doctor, you present it, and it goes.
And I can use it for pharmacy.
What I had at Honeywell, I would submit my bills that I had paid, and they would reimburse me out of that.
Yes.
But I don't, that was so long ago.
After pushing for the HSA,
we don't have that decision.
thinking about it, so
We have a
the HRA would kind of bridge that gap, but not
I
take
don't
our funds.
scrutinize it quite as much just because
May or may not get used.
my cancer treatments. I mean, I hit the max on everything and so it's like, I got this because I knew that I would be going, like, I don't have to worry about having anything left over. But, thank you.
Well,
Thank you so much for what you do and helping us with the technology.
well, so,
The next meeting, I'll remind people that when they get called.
or if you're like, I'm going to have dental work, I've been putting this off, or, my knee's been bothering me, this is, you're going to have
after they call.
and that's fine to use it, especially since the money, you have to be a little bit more.
Yes.
And then she started asking follow-up questions.
These are big changes, and
Well, the mic wasn't on.
And then the other, well, the mic is on.
struggle.
The light's not on.
Well, I know that our lobby.
I don't want us to sit here
So do you have to try to get
listen to complaints and poor morale because of the experience.
Oh, okay, so. Yeah.
There is what keeps the chair flexible because sometimes, like Patty was saying tonight, there were 3 people in the queue and it's dreadful questions to grab and so there's no way for me to hit their button. Like their button.
And that was the same thing with HRA. You still have some starting money, but if you don't make it versus Well, and even like they are one potential.
Right, but then you have to, okay, so Brad jumps in, and I green light him, I green light everybody, and when Brad's finished,
blood
I
test.
have to wait. I can't turn off his mic until everybody else, okay.
Give people, I want to make sure that people, like, we're paying all this money, that they need it. Well, maybe we're only going because they aren't costed out of healthcare. That's my biggest concern. Keep our costs down. Employees don't get.
Okay.
Employees were sick. Don't do anything to help. They work hard. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Disabled.
Sacrifice costs, bus drivers.
Right. And even those they hadn't anticipated it.
News, all because they didn't want to pay the $80
It's for
to go to the doctor.
air eye dart, but it's sort of only have to go around and get the reimbursement.
I definitely see all the family plans going to options. You know, like $10 difference.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're only getting HSA options. So that might be a slight incentive. You feel like you're going to be healthy.
She has a number of, her husband passed away, and she had a bunch of dark passes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Want to sit
Or the front.
out front?
Out
You
front.
Find them?
Just
Tell them to
sit
come
out
in?
there.
Yeah, okay, fine. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Because I just talked to Bill about it. We just talked to Jace over here, and in fact, we need your guys to.
Right. Well, and unfortunately, people, if they're healthy, they'll continue to be. You know, no one goes, well, what if I'm painting my house and I fall off the ladder? Like, you don't have to have cancer. You can just be hurt. You know, and then but maybe not disabled. Maybe you don't qualify under the short-term disability. Yeah, everyone's circumstances are different. Or the short-term disability helps cover your pay, but doesn't cover the health care, which is common. I haven't looked at the short-term disability policy that you guys have and offer for employees. So it's just, for me, it also feels like the one area I know a lot about. Versus, like, I don't know diddly squat about buses.
Just told me a minute
Other than I like riding on them.
told you his wife's going ill, and in fact, they brought hospice to the house.